Salutations, episode 7, and today we've got a special video for you guys. Now, today this video was a request inspired by Carolot Queen over in Border Love Twitch chat. She's a moderator over there, and she runs her own Twitch channel. So go check out both of them. I'll leave links in the description. If I don't, somebody yell at me in the comments, please. And I'll make sure to add it after if I forget. So we are going to be covering Maya, and I'm going to give my generic breakdown of what all the skill trees are, what weapons types you should probably use, and then I'm going to go a little bit more in the weeds, explain what each of the skills are to my best understanding, and then explain all the different stats on a weapon and explain why they impact the gameplay, and then show off some of the gameplay loops that I like to utilize. So, first, we're going to cover from right to left when it comes to skill trees. We have our Cataclysm tree. This skill tree is late game damage. This has Cloud Kill in it, which is one of the strongest skills that Maya has. We have Reaper, which is another really strong damage skill. It's a bullet damage, not gun damage. It says gun damage, it's bullet damage increase. Then we have Ruin, which is applying slag and is doing two different dot types to potentially strip that shield. It's really nice. And then we move on to Blue Tree, which is our sustain tree. It's called Harmony. In the beginning, we get damage skills, but then later on, it's our late game sustain tree. So this is going to have Elated. This has Sustenance. This has Life Tap. These are really strong survivability skills. Getting 5% max HP per second. We're getting a relatively good passive health regen. This scales the more damage that you've taken, the more healing this is going to give you, up to 2% at 5 points. And then Life Tap is a kill skill, so after you kill an enemy, you get life steal for any damage that you're dealing based on the percent that you have in the skill. Then we have Green Tree, which is our utility tree. This starts off as a survivability-esque tree, and then it breaks down into utility at the later half. So we start off with Ward, which is a really strong survivability skill. We're getting increased capacity, reduction in delay. We get Kinetic Reflection, which is a kill skill that at 10 points completely negates damage. We have 100% damage reduction from bullets. Freaking crazy. And then after that, we get Inertia, which is another survivability-esque skill. And then we get our utility stuff. We get Converge, which is going to pull in a whole bunch of targets to one spot. It's a singularity effect on your phase lock. We get Quicken, which is giving us cooldown rate. And then we get Subsequence, which is giving us a chance whenever we kill a target that is phase locked, it can redirect that existing phase lock and target another guy. Instead of having to wait for the cooldown again, this can apply to a second guy immediately, although it does apply with the prior duration. So the duration does pass over. We have Fleet, which is for movement speed when your shields are depleted. And we have Thought Lock things. I guess I forgot to mention Scorn. Scorn is at the bottom of Blue Tree. This is a slag utility skill. Pretty cool. I'll give a more in-depth breakdown of the skill trees in a minute. So next up, I'm going to talk about the weapon types I like to use. So first, we're going to talk about slag, because slag is kind of important, and I did skip out on a very important skill to talk about when it came to Red Tree, and that is Flicker. Flicker, when it comes to different weapons, is going to be impactful or not impactful. So Flicker is increasing our status effect chance. Status effects, like slag, and some of the items I like to utilize for applying slag are SMGs, high fire rate, relatively okay slag chance. They're usually pretty good. I use them a lot on Gage. That's really the main character I use them on. One of the better items, which I haven't gotten on this save yet, one of the better items for this is a Maliwan Sniper, because then we get a really high base slag chance. And with a high base slag chance, Flicker is going to increase it more. So I prefer getting into like the 70s range on a Sniper, which is the Maliwan Barrel Maliwan Sniper Rifle. And It's going to get into your 70s range if you get the right parts on it, but realistically, anything that's like 60 to 70% on a sniper is really good. And then when it comes to your other weapons, I tend to like high fire rate weapons on Maya, high base fire rate. They get impacted by rec a lot more because they have a higher base fire rate, so a 50% increase to our fire rate here goes from 11.1 to like 16, 17-ish, which is pretty good. And with the Troublemaker, I would love to have better parts on this, but this is what we got. We got a Jacob's Grip and Torque Barrel. Both of these they're not increasing fire rate at all, so we're having the base a higher elevated fire rate of it being a Vladoff weapon. We get 8. 8 is an okay number, but this means we're getting up to 12 fire rate when we activate Rec. And then the Droog, it's just a go-to amazing sniper rifle, and I if you could notice, I love Vladoff weapons on Maya. Vladoff is an amazing company for Maya. We're getting a lot of really good weapons out of it. The high fire rate weapons tend to be the better ones in my opinion. Dahl is also pretty good. I like using this Dahl minigun. If you like burst weapons, Dahl can do pretty well. And then Malawan, of course, is an amazing company for Maya, especially going through the story, as having that elevated dot damage could be really good for what you're doing. But that's mostly covering the weapon types. We're gonna go back to a more in-depth explanation of the skill tree. So, Foresight's pretty self-explanatory. Mag size, reload speed. Flicker, as I was saying, this is more impactful the higher the chance that the status effect is. And why is that? So this takes the number, not the percent, the number of the slag of like the elemental effect chance. So let's say the elemental effect chance is 70%. So we take 70 and we times this by 0.24 because I have 24% increase to flicker. So that's 16.8. Then we add that to 70, and then we get 86.8. That's our new slag chance. Our base slag chance was 70, with 4 points in flicker, we're at 86.8. And again, it scales better the higher that base is, because we're multiplying by the same amount. So, again, better with higher slag chance. That's really the main thing here. Immolate is amazing, because it applies a secondary full damage source as a 50% incendiary damage. It's not a, hey, we're adding incendiary damage. We're not adding for 50% of your gun damage. We are making that as a separate damage instance, causing it to get other buffs. We have, again, Cloud Kill, really strong. Just it's a cloud that does corrosive damage. Pretty simple, but something that you can do is you pair this with Converge, and you're getting all of those targets to be swooped into one little spot, and then you shoot them to get Cloud Kill active, causing all of them to get hit by Cloud Kill, instead of just the one guy in the phase lock. Now, Blue Tree here, we have a couple things that I want to talk about. We have Life Tap being the main thing. Life Tap is going to scale the further you are in the game. It's going to get better the further you are in the game. And why is that? Well, the further you are, the more that your guns are going to be dealing damage in comparison to the amount of HP you have. Your guns' damage tend to be way higher than the amount of HP that you're going to have in the later game. When you get to like the 50s, 60s levels, this is an amazing skill, and you only really need 1 to 2 points in it. However, earlier in the game, it's a lot less value because the weapons don't deal as much damage to heal you. And of course your HP is lower too, but the amount of damage that you're dealing scales way faster than the amount of HP that you have. So the lower level you are, the less valuable Life Tap is. And then I have Subsequence here and Suspension. And this is a very odd skill on Maya, and there's a couple issues with it. First, again, as I brought up, when you phase lock a target and you kill them, that transfers that phase lock to another target with the same duration. So if you killed the target at 50% duration, then it's going to utilize that duration to get to the other target, and it's going to keep that same duration when it starts up the next phase lock. So let's say it's like takes a second to get to the next target. It was at 50%, then it's 50% minus 1 second, and that's how long you have to kill this next target in phase lock before the phase lock ends. So it is very difficult to get the right way of using this skill. And in a lot of cases, it can actually just be a detriment to you because it's preventing your cooldown from happening to apply Converge again. However, when Subsequence activates on a target, Converge will do the Singularity effect again, which is why I have Suspension. Suspension adds 2.5 seconds to your duration, which then makes Subsequence a little bit more effective. And this does get better with different class mods that you can equip that increase both these skills, or, well, that increases Suspension. There's no reason to get a class mod that increases Subsequence, but a class mod that increases Suspension, giving us more duration, gives us higher chance to have value out of getting Subsequence. Pretty good. Now, with Kinetic Reflection, the DR isn't really as important as it may make out to be in the early game. The earlier in the game you are, the less helpful this is, because at 5 points this is a 50% damage reduction. But if you're only taking like 25 damage per hit, you're taking now like 12.5 damage per hit. Not really that impactful. It is a 50% reduction, but if your HP is at like 300 and your shield is at like 300, that damage difference isn't that significant, especially in comparison to just increasing your shield capacity or going for another skill like Sweet Release to heal. And I know that Shines said that Sweet Release isn't good for survivability because it aggroes the rest of the enemies there. However, I do want to bring up that in a lot of cases, you're going to be aggroing a lot of enemies anyways, just by using phase lock in a group. So just because you end up aggroing a whole bunch of enemies doesn't mean that this isn't effective. You're still getting 15% of your health back every time that a orb comes back and heals you. And you get 5 points in here, that's 5 orbs, which is a good amount of healing. It's really, really helpful for this. Now, I didn't talk about Restoration, and the reason why I didn't talk about this, because it really isn't that good. It's increasing your max health, which could be helpful for some of these later skills, but earlier game it's not as impactful because you kind of want to have access to Health Gate, which, if you don't know what Health Gate is, Health Gate, when you are above 50% HP, if you take enough damage in one damage instance, or within a cluster of the damage within a second or two, it will drop down your HP to, instead of insta-killing you, it drops you down to a very low amount of HP and prevents you from taking damage for a second or two. And by just having a higher max HP, without having a good healing source, it's just going to cause your health gate to proc way later. It's going to proc it at a later time, or make the damage threshold a little bit more difficult to get to activate Health Gate. Res, I didn't mention Res, but Res is really good for multiplayer, so if you are going into multiplayer, take a point from somewhere and put it in here. Amazing multiplayer skill. Instantly getting somebody out of fight for your life is awesome. Sustenance, this gets better the more you have max HP. Why is that? Well, it's a percentage of your missing HP, and that missing HP is going to scale with the more HP you have when you take damage. So if you have 1,000,000 HP in total and you only have 100 HP left, it's going to be 2% of 900,000 HP, 999,900 HP. There we go. 2% of that. Which is a relatively large number. And then when you get to the halfway points, we have 2% of 500,000. and so on. The longer that this is healing, the less healing it's going to give you. And then recompense, I honestly don't know of an instance where this is a good skill to grab unless you're building around it. So I don't recommend grabbing this ever. Thought Lock, I don't really have a use for this. It's not really that. It doesn't fit my playstyles any, and I don't ever use it. So I don't recommend using. I recommend trying it out to see if you like how it plays at some point, but it's not something that I recommend utilizing personally. And then I don't have any points in Fleet, not because it's not a good skill, but because I like having my shields up, and the more I have my shields up, the less I'm getting bonuses from this. However, this is really good if you just want to get through sections fast. So if you have a Rough Rider or some other like low capacity shield that you can just break, then utilizing this to increase your movement speed could be a good idea. And then there's a whole bunch of skills over here that I just don't grab ever. I don't grab Helios. I don't like that it's a very low damage. It's one instance of damage that is about a third the amount of damage that Cloud Kill does. And Cloud Kill lasts 5 seconds. This is an instantaneous one thing. So Helios is kind of just bad when it comes to damage comparison here. And that's 5 points versus 1 point. It's like, no. Backdraft, I don't really grab because I don't do melee very often. And then Blight Phoenix. This can be helpful if you put like 1 point in here to prevent those melee targets from coming up to you and being a nuisance. But I don't grab it. I don't really use it. I'm usually staying away from melee targets anyway, so it's not really a big deal. And it's a kill skill, so you have to kill something for this to be effective. So next up, we're going to move into some gameplay here. I have some pre-recorded footage of me shooting things, and I'm going to explain some of the ins and outs of the gear that I like to pick for Maya and going through the playthroughs. First, we're going to talk about weapons. So I brought up Flicker earlier, and Flicker with the whole stats for slag chance thing, but if you are going through your playthrough and you're like normal mode, TVHM, Flicker isn't really helping too much because dot damage isn't good. Dot damage just isn't good. So you're only using it to increase slag chance. If you're not using slag, then there's no reason to grab it. So some of the slag tools that I like to use are the Slagga with the high projectile count, the slow hand, and the reason for the slow hand is because it does 6 instances of slag chance. You have your 3 projectiles, each of them dealing splash damage. So when a weapon does splash damage, it adds an extra chance for it to apply slag because that splash is a separate instance of damage. So impact 1, impact 2, and impact 3, splash damage 1, splash damage 2, and splash damage 3 all have a slag chance. And with the slow hand, it's a really high base slag chance of like, what, 60 or 72%, I think? And it's a shotgun, so pretty good slag chance. Another item that I like to use is the Slag Snider. It has to be a really good Snider, though. You can get upwards of like 79% slag chance, and then with Flicker, it can go up to over 100. It'd be like 102 point something percent. So it'd be guarantee slag, basically, for most targets. Some targets have a reduced slag chance, and the higher level they are above you, the lower the slag chance will be. And then, of course, Ruin, amazing slag tool. Scorn, amazing slag tool if you're using either of those. And then, coming into the shooting weapons, we have our Vladoff weapons. Those are my favorite to use with Maya. Elemental-based weapons are usually really good, because the dot does help with lifesteal, with life tap. It does help there, and we have that increased dot chance, and we're dealing dot-based stuff with Cloud Kill already, so dot isn't bad here. Now, it's still not a good damage source. Dot itself isn't a good damage source, so one of the things I recommend doing is to just focus on high fire rate, high damage weapons. Get your Vladoff snipers. I like the Vladoff pistols. Those tend to be one of my favorites, but I know doll pistols are also pretty good. And then assault rifles are also pretty good. I have a doll minigun on this save, and I use that a couple times, but it's all right. It's not the best I still prefer the Vlad pistols over it, but the assault rifle and miniguns are pretty cool. And really, that's about the most that I like out of weapons for Maya. The high projectile / high fire rate weapons that are pretty good at a distance. Now, shotguns can be pretty good with Maya too. I just don't really use them too often on Maya. I prefer to see all the status effects everywhere, despite them not being as good. Now, when it comes to like grenades, find what your personal weakness is with your gameplay loop. So if you are struggling to slag targets, then get a slag bouncing Betty or a slag sort of grenade. And then if you are struggling with another thing, whether it's like healing, if you're struggling with healing, or survivability, transfusion grenade is really good for you. Those are going to heal you based on the amount of damage that the transfusions do. You could get a singularity grenade, a longbow singularity. This way you can draw all of the targets to more locations, so you can like set them all up right where the phase lock's going to be without needing to get converge. You just lock them all into that one spot. You proc phase grasp, ruin hits all of those targets with that slag, and then you start pumping them full of lead. Works pretty well. And in other cases, it could be another healing type vector. If you have some sort of lifesteal weapon, like a Moxie weapon, or you have some other skills that if you don't have other healing factors than lifesteal, or you're just using lifesteal, then some sort of instantaneous damage grenade could be really helpful, like a chain lightning, a lightning bolt, those kinds of things. Or if you need more delayed healing, again, transfusions are good, but if you have a lifesteal weapon, then getting any of the Tiny Tina DLC grenades, pretty awesome for that. Now, something else that I'd like to talk about here is Accelerate. Accelerate, I know Shines just said, no, don't get this bad for some weapons. It is useful in cases. There are use cases for it, and it's not a bad skill. It's giving you gun damage, which gun damage is something that Maya doesn't have too much of. She has bullet damage going down Red Tree. It's not the same. It's similar, but it's not the same. And there's a technical explanation for that, for like in-depth later build crafting, but it's not as important for you right now. So when it comes to that, Accelerate increases the projectile speed of weapons. So if you're using a weapon that naturally has a slower projectile, like the Sloth sniper rifle, it's a doll sniper, and it has slower projectiles than other weapons. It's a really nice skill to have to increase the projectile speed of those weapons. And it really is only affecting much when you're either, 1, using Torg gyrojet style weapons, or 2, utilizing a unique weapon with a reduced speed. So, just stuff to consider. Mind's Eye is another skill that's very top of Blue Tree. Crit damage. It is more effective with weapons that don't have a high crit, but don't have any reductions in crit. So let's say just your generic Vlad pistol. You're gonna get more effective damage out of that when it comes to Mind's Eye. You're gonna get more effectiveness out of Mind's Eye by using something like this than you would be utilizing a Jacob Sniper. Jacob Sniper gives you a 160% critical hit damage buff, so with Mind's Eye you are adding 20% to that 160%, getting us up to 180%. Sure, you're increasing your damage, but it's diminishing returns in comparison to other weapons that don't have a high critical hit damage modifier. Kind of complicated, I know. It's this math, but it's just the basic premise of, if you see high crit damage, you don't need other crit damage skills unless those are also really high crit damage. That kind of thing. And that'll apply with a lot of different damage types. The more in-depth you get into build making, the more you'll start looking at specific numbers, and it'll start to matter a bit more. But right now, it's just as simple as don't overinvest into one damage type. if you are over investing into one damage type, then make sure that all of the reasons that you're doing that are significant. Or it's the only thing that's actually buffing that damage. Now, some other playstyles that I like to do, the Nurse is a really good class mod. It gives +5 to Elated, or it gives additives to the Elated skill depending on the level. And Elated is the one that's giving you that health regen in Blue Tree, so if you get down a Blue Tree, it's really nice to have. And it gives you a passive health regen buff to everyone on the team. So it's a smaller amount, but it's still a good amount of health regen. So one of the things that I'd like to emphasize here is you don't always need to phase grasp targets. Phase grasp is an amazing thing. It's an amazing tool, and if you have enough cooldown, do it. Utilize it as much as possible for what you are needing to do. But don't overuse it if you don't have very good cooldown yet. So cooldown methods could be coming from your relic, potentially your class mod, and your skill tree. And so some of the things that I like to do when it comes to phase grasping is look around the field. Who are the ones that are going to deal the most damage to me? And some easy ways to think about that are, what enemies have a fire or shock weapon? Is your defense mostly shield, or is it mostly health? And if the target has a shock weapon, then you're mostly going to be worried about them dealing damage to your shield. If the target has a fire weapon, you're mostly worried about them dealing damage to your health. And so if you have a larger shield, then you would want to focus on preventing that guy that deals shock damage from dealing damage to you. Phase lock him, and then you kill off the health-based target, like the fire damage target, and then you focus back on him. This way you're not getting double teamed by two different elements that can absolutely shred your survivability. Or anybody that has a corrosive weapon, those in the later game, the further you get, tend to suck even more and more. So some of the issues that arise are, hey, this guy has a corrosive weapon, I'm now dotted, and this dot lasts freaking forever, and so now I'm dead. So one of the things that I recommend is, if you see a corrosive guy, kill it first. I don't care if there's a guy shooting slag at you. Don't really care if this guy shooting fire or shock at you. Make sure that corrosive guy is either dead or out of commission, so that you can focus on killing everything else without just dying from getting one dot. Because corrosive sucks. I guess they had to balance it to make sure that you didn't have, so that you couldn't have 0 elemental weaknesses. But now that we're coming into the Hurley fight, I'm going to let you guys listen to the amazing music that's going to come up. And then there's going to be a segment going into Heroes Past, covering how armored targets and flesh targets coincide. But I'll see y'all when we get there. Alright, so now we are over at Heroes Pass, and we are here to showcase how to fight what looks to be a flesh target, but is actually armored. So we have like your Hyperion anti-freedom fighters, we have your psychos, your like armored psychos, those kinds of things. So we have our baseline of they have a yellow health bar, hit them with corrosive damage. And while that does apply for most things, the flesh style targeted enemies, you want to hit body shots if you are utilizing a corrosive weapon. Crit damage is going to be most impactful if you're using a fire weapon. Kind of weird, I know, but fire weapons do the best when it comes to crit there. Now, I mean, you could probably still land crits with your corrosive and deal more damage, but for the most part, for either of those enemy types, you're going to be wanting to land your crits with a fire weapon of some kind. It's a very weird setup that I used for this, but it worked out pretty well for showcasing this, I think. And there's the little drop barge at the second area that I'll use to really showcase it, but I have to get past these little loaders first. And kind of showcase what a balanced setup can look like. We have two little pistols. We can get away with having 2 pistols in our loadout. Although having a shock SMG also wouldn't be a bad idea. I tried using the Betty that I had, the bouncing Betty. That was slag, but it just didn't want to do the thing. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. So here is a really good spot to showcase this. We slag our targets, we strip their shields, and then we pull out our fire weapon and we land a crit. See, no resist word popped up when I landed that crit at that end there. It was just boom. Oh, a thing about turtle shields and OP levels, don't use ones that are too large, as if it takes up more than your max HP, then it brings you to like 1 HP. If you get shot like this, you just die. You just die. There's no health gate, no nothing. You just die. But yeah, that's gonna be the end of this video. See you all in the next one. StereoLotus77 signing off.